Hello, everyone. This is Melissa Bourbon coming back at you with a Writer Spark Academy craft chat. And we are here with Tonya Kappes. This is part 2 of creating systems and strategies for authors. So grab a cup of coffee, settle in, and learn more about how to turn your passion for writing into a business with Tonya Kappes. In part 1, we were talking about strategies, Tonya's folders, and repurposing content. And now we're going to jump right in with another strategy, which is ARC teams.
Another strategy is an ARC team. I don't know where the writers are in your group on that, but even just if you have 10 people, 5 people, why are they on your ARC team? Just to do a review? That doesn't make sense to me. So my ARC team has tasks. And so I do have someone, I came up with this before I even had my assistant that does my ARC team. But they have tasks and they have to give me a picture of them holding their book. Or they have to send me a picture of their animal sitting next to their book. Mm-hmm. And so I repurpose all of those pictures, and they go into that file for that month that the book was released, because that next year I'm going to put that book on sale. Mm-hmm. And so I want their things. They also have to send me or send my assistant now, but they have to put it on Goodreads, and they have to put it on BookBub, and they have to put a review on Amazon once it goes live. Mm-hmm. And so I've already got their BookBub, or their BookBub and their Goodreads, because you can do that before the book goes live. Mm-hmm. And so I will make a graphic sometimes with them holding their picture with their book, and then their review. And then also I send it to them, or I put it in the group, and my assistant will, but I did all of this up until a few years ago. And they use that because they're like, oh, it's a book of, me holding the book. They love anything about them. Right.
Yeah.
And so, or anything with their animal on in the picture. And so I'll put their personal thing on their picture, and they will sit there and promote the book and promote the book and promote the book. And I don't have to do anything. Right. But I do. I mean, it's not that I don't, but that is some way that people don't use their ARC team, but they have specific tasks that are done. But I use the pictures myself. My assistant doesn't put those pictures together. I do all of that. Mm-hmm. Because I specifically want it a certain way, and I know the way I'm going to repurpose it. And then if I read maybe chapter 1 for YouTube, I take all those pictures as I'm reading chapter 1, and the pictures are just funneling through as I'm reading chapter 1, and it's not even me. Mm-hmm. And so they're here in chapter 1. And then I'm getting more and more reviewers on YouTube. And then all of a sudden I've gotten over 4,000 watches, and now I'm monetized, and now I'm making money on YouTube. So it kind of all feeds the machine. That's my motto. It all feeds the machine, the repurposed content.
Okay. So just listening to you, I feel overwhelmed. So yeah. So, I know you write in the mornings, right? So you have dedicated writing time. And then do you work on some of this in the afternoons every single day? Do you have a system for that? Like, okay, on the first I'm doing this, on the second I'm doing this, or, how do you juggle all of that? Because it is a lot.
It is a lot. So on CEO Day, I also know what book is coming out. And so like for me, I do a book a month, but that's only because I'm 3 books ahead. I wasn't like that before. But if you just do one book every 2 months, 3 months, a year, whatever, you have time to put together those graphics. It's easy.
You would think.
You would think. But to me, it's my job. It's my business. I'm it. This is our income, my family income. So I treat it as a job, even though we're at home. So I make sure I have the time. Yeah, I make sure that, if I'm going on a family vacation, then I'm going to plan that. If I'm going to be the CEO of my company, I have to boss up and do the things, right? So I know the most important is the writing. Okay. Mm-hmm. So every morning I make sure I do writing sprints for 2 hours. And as long as I can get 2,500 words in, that 2 hours, it might be more, it might be 5,000, depends on how it's going that day. But then I'm great. I'm happy. The world is wonderful because I know that's what moves the needle for me. And it's not the new releases, it's the backlist, which is a whole nother
Right.
topic. But as far as my systems go, I have to stay in that regimented thing. So I'm usually finished writing by noon. And then I might have, I mean, people are like, oh, what about, doctor's appointments? Okay, but generally, how many doctor's appointments do you have? You have one every day? No.
Right.
So I make sure that all my doctor appointments are generally in June or July because I've got the least amount of clothes on. So I don't have to weigh in all those big clunky boots, right? All of my stuff, like I have my dentists are in June and then again in January. But all of any kind of medical appointment I need, like a mammogram, gynecologist, my annual, whatever it is all set on one day in June. I try to hit them all in one day or at least in 1 week. So I know that, it's not going to really interrupt my job, but it wouldn't be any different than having another job where you had to take off for the time being, right? You're still going to go do your job, but then you got to take off to go do that.
Yeah. So you have CEO day, you have medical week.
Yeah, that's right. And so then in the afternoon is when I do put on the business hat. And it's all a business. Even when I sit down to write, it's a business. And so I will, and so say for instance, CEO day is CEO day, and I try to schedule all of it, right? But then something happens to where I'm on your thing with you and Diane that I was on. So of course I want to make sure that I schedule a post for that, or I might have a takeover that day or that week. I always say, can you please let me be admin? So that might be something like that. Also, every Friday I sit down and look at my ads and dig into that part of it.
Oh my gosh. Forgot about ads.
Yeah, that's a whole nother thing, right?
That's a whole nother thing. Oh,
yeah.
Man.
So, and I have a system with my ads, right? But that's too much to go into.
Well, that'll be a separate chat sometime.
Yeah. So, but in the afternoon, like I have friends that they have like theme days, that they on business, but I don't necessarily do that. So, sometimes my day is spent. So more importantly than Facebook or social media is the Patreon group. Like I love my Patreon group and they're paying to be there, right?
How many people do you have there?
A couple hundred. Yeah. And so they're paying to be there. So what I do is in the afternoon, I'm like, okay, I'm going to write this second story. So in the afternoon, I call it slow hustling with a cup of coffee. And I slow hustle my second story and put it up for them. And
yeah, I remember we were chatting one time, just texting, and you were like, hang on, I have to write 1,000 words or something. And I was like, okay, and then you're back, half an hour later, and like, okay, I'm done.
That was a great 1,000 words. I mean, they just get thrown up at their 1,000 words and they move the plot forward and the murder forward. And my readers like, oh my God, the readers in Patreon, my Patreon readers, they love it. And, some of them will send me the mistakes. I'm like, oh, you really don't have to. But if you do, I love it. But if they're going to be caught when it eventually goes to be a book. Yeah. But I know that right now, that's what I focus on in the afternoon because I've already scheduled everything for Facebook and it's there and, those kind of things. So, I don't have to worry about that when you schedule it out a month in advance because it's always going to work. And when my mom had her car accident and I went home for those 3 months, if I would have not had these systems in place and things already scheduled, I wouldn't have probably had an income. You know what I mean? I would have had an income, but it would have been a long process to try. It would have been very stressful trying to stay on social media and those kind of things.
Yeah.
But I was able to pop in and say, some of the lives are not going to happen because this happened. I've got to be at home, but I'll still be around. I'll still be on here. And so, my business didn't even skip a beat with my systems in place. And so that's when my business coach said, back 4 months ago, don't burn it down. It's work. Look what happened. You had a tragedy after another tragedy. And, then my dad got sick within this whole span of 10 months. And then my 3 kids were in car wrecks and, COVID and all that good stuff, that's not for my systems. And now you're making me love my systems all over.
I know. I'm so impressed.
Don't burn it down. And I'm like, I'm so bored. But then I don't also let my self-care get lost. So for instance, I'm very regimented, so I do jazzercise at home every morning because they close down the studio. I still go to Weight Watchers every Wednesday at noon.
Do you really?
Yeah, every Wednesday at noon. I'm still there. And so
lifetime member, right?
Yeah, lifetime member, 14 years. I still get those. Why are you here? And I'm like, I'm still a struggle, but all of those same routines. It's just in my routine, and I make time for myself. Like I take my walks daily. I go out and feed. Now it looks a little different because we moved to the property, but like I'll get up in the morning and go outside and say grateful things and walk around my pond and feed the fish that are in it. And try to really take care of my mental health. Make sure that Eddie and I are done at a certain time of the day. I still cook supper every night. So some people call it dinner. We call it supper.
Call it tea.
Around here. What do you call it?
The British call it tea.
Yeah. So, and dinner is noon around here. We call lunch dinner, and then we have supper. But so we make sure that we have, now that we work together, you got to stop and have your downtime. It's like having kids, you stop to have your kids, although my kids are grown and out of the house like yours. And we work at home. I could be working 24/7.
Yeah, it's really easy to do. And especially if you don't, I struggle with this, with separation in the house, because it's so easy to sit on the chair with the laptop. But I do have an office, and I am so much more productive when I come into my office, but it's so easy to sit in that chair, and then, you're in that same room all day long and all night long. And if Carlos, my husband, is out, then it's easy to keep working. I forget what I used to do before I wrote to pass the time,
Right. And I will, my friends all know that I work. And so we might go meet for a lunch or go for a walk or something like that. But Atomic Habits. Have you read Atomic Habits yet?
I have. No, I haven't. I haven't finished reading it.
So, he talks about working from home. Which after I read his book, I'm like, oh my gosh, that's so right. Because I would go on the kitchen table, I would sit on the couch. So a lot of times I write in my camper, my travel trailer, which is parked out here, which we do use, or in my office. But I was starting to mix home and work. Yeah. And so that's not a very good habit to get into, because then it's hard because then when I walk in my kitchen, I'm like, oh, I don't want to eat. I want to write. Or I don't want to cook. I want to work. And so he talks about making sure you have that designated space from home. And so that is what I do. So I make sure I have designated space from home. I also take care of myself by continuing education classes. Most of them are on mindset, things like that, business classes, really nothing with writing as much anymore. But I've always, the only thing I've not really found is a group of writers to go on trips with and things like that.
Girl, you just need to let me know.
Yeah. I thought I had a local group, and then I made the USA Today bestsellers list, and one of them got super, super upset. And she had written paranormal and cozies, and I had at the time was writing paranormal cozies, and she said, I'm afraid that you're going to steal my material. And we had the same editor, and she wrote me a Dear John letter. And I was like, oh my gosh. And so I immediately called her, and I was like, please don't do this. I'll quit writing. I told this person, I'll quit writing. I just want your friendship. And she's like, I knew you'd do this, but no, I just can't handle the success.
I think that's a real thing. It's the jealousy
It
within the
broke
field for anybody that experiences that success it's hard. It's hard for people.
Yeah. I mean, so much so that there was another really good friend of mine, Duffy Brown,
Mm-hmm.
who does live here. She called and she said, what did you do to this author? And I'm like, what do you mean? And at the time they had a big blog, and it's not out anymore. And she's like, well, they're looking for new people. And I suggested you. And one said, oh no, she steals content from such and such author. So this author was bad mouthing me.
Oh, wow.
And I mean, I'm like, oh my gosh. And, it was really difficult. So that's when I just kind of started cocooning, honing down and building up, my own brand and working on these systems and trying to not be on Facebook because I didn't want to hear all that.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't want to see all the negativity. So it just all kind of like going back to your initial question 20 minutes ago, it all kind of goes down to some things that I've learned, some things that I've been through, some of my own things and things that have worked for others and things that haven't. So I have learned to look to the romance community for anything that's up and coming. Cozy is so far behind the times when it comes to new ways of doing things that I literally look at romance writers and what they're doing and kind of just tweak it to cozy mystery. There's a romance writer that I love to watch by the name of Megan Quinn. And she writes steamy romance, but she does the best Instagram marketing and stories. And so she does like the best little stories for releases. And I'm like, I could totally do that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not like she probably got it from somewhere else. But so now I have the same kind of template for every book that comes out on Instagram that I can use.
Mm-hmm.
And so and it goes into that July folder for that book. So, things can, get repurposed. So it's just kind of like that. But for systems, as far as other writers, I don't do other writer groups just because I don't want to. I'm still hurt after. I mean, it's been years since that happened,
Mm-hmm.
so I'm still hurt after all these years. That it's really not been good for me to. So I'm kind of leery when I go into other groups and things like that. But I still have never found that good group of cozy writers. I just want to be able to go and hang out with and be like,
Mm-hmm.
oh yeah, let's talk and let's write and all
Mm-hmm.
that kind of fun stuff.
Yeah.
So that system hasn't worked for me, but there are a lot of writers that have been able, like with you and Diane, y'all have been able to find your groove, which is so great. And I'm jealous of. I wish I had that.
It's easy because we live a mile and a half apart, you know.
Well,
And
so did I with this other girl.
and we're at the same place in our careers. Neither one of us have, had that sort of skyrocket success, but we have a really solid friendship too. But yeah, I mean, I get it. I get how difficult it is to see somebody else succeed when you think I'm just as good, right? And I write just as great as that person. Why can't I do it? I mean, I think that's human nature to feel that jealousy, but it's a shame that it impinges on the friendship.
Oh, I mean, I was like, I said, I'll quit writing. Like, I just wanted the friendship, right? Because that meant so much more to me than the writing.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm glad that she said, no, forget it. Because, I don't know, where I'd be at this time. But, and I have no idea what even this person's up to nowadays. But anyway, so that is part of like that whole, everything that I do for my business in the afternoon is for my reader, what can I do to do something for my reader today? Or, but if there's nothing, but if you think about it, interestingly, like if you really sat down to think about it, and really how I got to the CEO day was that my business partner or my business manager, or whatever she want to call her, she's like, well, you need to write down what you do every day. And like after you get done writing, so I'd find myself on social media, like, oh, I need to schedule something for this day. I need to schedule. So every day I was on social media scheduling something. And she's like, well, what if you just took one day and scheduled it all? And then what do you do the rest of the afternoons? You can go on your nature hikes, you could be traveling and you could write in the morning and then your social media is done. So you could be out, your husband and you can enjoy your camper and you could be traveling or you can go see one of your kids. You can go out to lunch. Or, you can continue to write if you want to. So really, what else would we be doing in the afternoon?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
It's a great way to look at it.
So, yeah. So, I'm like, yeah, you're right. I'm doing the thing that's going to feed the machine, in the morning, the main thing. So, so the arc, my arcs, so another thing that I do is, if you have a book out, I did an online book signing, which was a lot of fun.
I've seen you do those. Yeah.
Yeah, so that kind of goes also into my marketing systems. So now every 6 months, because I always plan my book releases in quarters, right? I always do the quarters. And so I know that, people like to get books for Christmas presents and especially became super popular during the shutdown because people weren't going to
bookstores and
stores and things like that. So I just simply put it up online in an online form and put it on my newsletter and say I'm gonna have book signing. It's online, and I always include the shipping, which is media mail. But then it just if you offer like something else, like generally during the winter time, I offer like a little book bag, so it'll be a little bit more than media mail. But anyway, so what happened is that I schedule those every 6 months. And I literally sit in my camper with their book and say, hey, Misa, this is Melissa. What are we winning? What are we going by? This is for you. And I sign it and I show it to them. And then, but I've already made the envelope. So maybe that's something I do, in the afternoon, but I always make the envelope. So as soon as I sign it, it goes right in that envelope. And the next day it's going to the post office. And I have stamps.com at home, which is a discount for us. That's easy to do. And so it's already stamped and ready to go. So, I make it as much easiest as possible as it can be.
But part of that, I think part of that success for you with those types of tasks is you're going back to your gift of the gab, right? You can sit there on live, FaceTime live or Zoom or whatever, and just chat with people in the chat, and it's very easy for you. That is so hard for me to do. So you have to also find what works for you because I can't force that, right? It wouldn't be authentic. It would be like, it would just be challenging. So you have to find something that works for you.
Right. And so that's why I think that a lot of times, sometimes like reading one chapter of your book, like I always call it the chapter 1. And so I read chapter 1 to myself on video. And then I'm like, hey, welcome back to chapter 1. This week we're going to read blah, 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 blah. And I just sit there and read chapter 1 and I'm done. And then I'm like, okay, that can go up on my blog. That can go in my newsletter. That can go on YouTube. That can go on Facebook. At the time, it was Instagram TV, which I don't think they have that anymore.
No, they don't have it anymore.
And so, all those things are just extra content that you can do. And so now what I've done is I read chapter 1 before the book comes out. So, they're hearing me do it. They're da, 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 da. And so whenever I put that in my newsletter, 78% of my newsletter is not on social media. 78%. So a lot of my readers, so whenever I put chapter 1 on my newsletter, it shoots up. I mean, my sales, pre-orders. As a matter of fact, going back to my mom's accident, I had left the hospital to go get food. And I'm like, I just needed to get out of the hospital. So I went to Panera Bread. And I'm standing there in line, and this lady goes, oh my gosh, how is your mother? And I said, oh, thank you for asking. And I'm telling her all the stuff. And I'm like, you go to, because I'm thinking she goes to church with my mom, because she looked like somebody would go to church with my mom for some reason. I go, oh, are you my mom's Sunday school? And she's like, no, I'm on your newsletter. And I went, oh my God. I was like, oh my gosh. I said, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. And she's like, no, no, no. And she's like, I need to introduce you to my husband. And so her husband is sitting there eating Panera, and he's like, oh, he had COVID, and I'm in his room. They let me stay in there, this, that, and the other. And I was reading your book and laughing. And he's like, what are you doing? She's like, I'm laughing. And he's like, I thought you were reading a murder mystery. She's like, oh, it is, but it's hysterical. So, she goes, and I joined your newsletter, and I'm on social media, but my most favorite thing that you do is read chapter 1. And so I'm like, oh my gosh, thank you so much. And she's like, I just don't do social media. And I'm like, oh, okay. So then 2 days later, she paid for a full year of Patreon. So now she's a Patreon member. So she's in there. And so I was like, oh my gosh, did it resonate? So that's when that was just, I've been doing chapter 1 for years, but never heard that I never paid attention to if it moved the needle until she said that. And then I went back and looked at clicks and oh, okay. And looked at book sales that day for that particular book and was super interested in that. So I knew that video was going to be super taken off. So if you're not comfortable live, you really need to try to do something with video that's not live.
Yeah, that's what I do for Writer Spark. That's what this is all about. It's much easier, and I've learned how to edit and all of that stuff. I haven't really made that crossover to my writing career, but guess what I'm doing tomorrow? Reading chapter 1.
Oh, you should. I tell people all the time that you should do that. So that is part of my book system. So for every book, I have a checklist. I do what's called a book Bible. And so as I'm writing the book, I keep a separate document. And in that document is all the graphics for that particular book that I made, the ones I was telling you about, add your Amazon wish list, blah, blah, blah. Every link that's going to need for that book. Also, I will be like, oh, that's a really good sneak peek when I'm writing. And it's not been edited, but that's okay because I can edit it later. So, but I'll forget it if I don't. So as I'm writing it, I think sneak peek. So I copy and highlight what I just wrote, go over to that document, type sneak peek, put in the sneak peek. And I have 2 or 3 sneak peeks. And then I have also a task, like everything I need to do for the book release, which that includes the first chapter. So all of those things get done, right? And it's still a template that I recreate for each book. So as I'm writing the book. And so then I can, again, have that there. So when I go back to my systems, that on whatever day it is that I put in so for instance, teaser or sneak peek happens on the 4th and the 11th of each month. So I don't have to go in and search for that, but I can go ahead and copy and paste it and schedule it. So it's part of that system that I did on my CEO day. So all of my systems kind of work together to create the system for all the social media. And so also I can put just a real little, so I don't know, do you know how to embed a link? Like if you were to go to Goodreads, and so to do your Goodreads update, you don't have to you want to update 50% reading, and then where you can comment, you can put a graphic there.
Yes.
You just have to sew the image. And so, I update that every week, and it's in the image, it'll say, have the sneak peek words in there. So it's not taking up any of the characters that you can have on there. So it might be part of that sneak peek. So that's a graphic that's made, for Goodreads. And also we'll put it on my blog, which my blog is, RSS into my Goodreads and to my Amazon page. So whenever you go to my Amazon page, you're going to see the latest,
Mhm.
blog post, which is, something. And then on Goodreads, it also funnels back to my blog. So it all just kind of works together in repurposed content. That's my main thing is repurpose, repurpose, repurpose. And then just to continue to do the same things each month for each launch. That's, you don't have to create the thing. And I would love to say that Facebook parties and stuff work still, but I just don't feel like I feel like I'm just talking to the same crowd on Facebook parties. So I really don't do those.
Mm-hmm.
But this is what we're getting to with this is people love book clubs. They love book clubs, and they don't. Some people, the cozy mystery, although I've seen a shift over the last few years in my demographic.
Mm-hmm.
My demographic has gotten 30s
Okay.
because, again, going back to the pandemic, people were moving home. Young girls are moving home or moving in with their parents again, or just having that little tiny group of interaction with their family. That I saw my demographic change from the 45 and up to 30s to up because I was getting messages. Oh my God, my mom we've been swapping books, and your series is like Schitt's Creek set in a campground.
Mm-hmm.
Mom loves Schitt's Creek because mom, most people over the age of 45 weren't watching Schitt's Creek. It was younger. So now a lot of my reviews from these younger people are like, oh my God, Schitt's Creek in a campground. You won't believe it. Hilarious. Blah, 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 blah. There's a mystery. And so I'm like, oh my God, you're right. It is kind of like that. And so, I started seeing my demographic go, so it started going skew. So they were like, oh, they started following me everywhere and were like, oh, you have a book club? And I'm like, yeah. And so every month, we always have a book club for the previous book that I had released.
Mm-hmm.
And so, what happens is that now I have somebody that runs those, but I'm in there. So they come up with those questions. So now I've gotten, we'll just use that camper series, 26 book club questions. So now all the books are getting reformatted with book club questions at the end of each book.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just getting repurposed and repurposed.
So adding book clubs, that's a whole nother thing that you do.
A whole nother system.
Yeah. Wow.
So under the umbrella of Tonya Kappes books,
mm-hmm.
right?
Well, it's no wonder you need 3 assistants and Eddie in the payroll.
Yeah. And but even my newsletters all have a system, right? So another thing is I release at the end of each month. I release a book on a Thursday. It can be every other month, every 6 months or whatever, but I specifically release on a Thursday before the end of the month. And that's because I'm in KU. And so I have all my pre-orders that bam, that month's income. And then all the page reads come the next month. So I never have a down month.
Mm-hmm.
All my months are pretty boop, 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 or whatever it is, right? And then that book just automatically, as soon as that book's put out, I'm not even thinking about promoting it. It goes to my backlist.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just looking at the next book and promoting it.
Yeah.
And so I did notice that every Friday my income would drop a little. But the other 6 days it was pretty steady. I'm like, why is that dropping? Right. And so I'm like, what can I do to make my income stay steady, throughout the week when there's not a book release? And so I'm like, oh, newsletter. Every time I put out a newsletter, I get an increase. But what can I do with my newsletter because I put out a newsletter weekly. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, and there's not a whole call to action to every week. My cat has a very popular article in there that everybody's like, they always comment back to her, or their animal will write her back. which is fun. But I'm like, oh, a book sale. And, I'm in KU, and you can put a book on sale, and through their KU countdown or unlimited, whatever it is, and you still make the same amount of money as if it wasn't, right? Yeah. So I'm like, today only. And so every Friday, guess what? They're going to get a today only book sale. And so my income, boom, went right back to where it was.
Well, it helps too that you have how many books? 80 something books now? Or what are you at?
So I think it's like 78 today.
Yeah. So that's a whole lot of backlist.
Yes.
So
yeah. And so that is, a way for me to reach them again.
Yeah.
So, but I would not have ever been able to get to this backlist if I wasn't running it like a business and a job and writing every day.
Yeah.
And, doing it every day. And again, I mean, we could go into craft and things like that, because I don't believe in writer's block. But we won't. But for the sake of that,
that's another day. That's
a whole other thing. People was like, oh, well, how can you write that? I couldn't write that. I can't figure out my story. Well, and to me, I'm not saying I don't get stuck when I'm writing, but I'm like, oh, something's not happening right. So I might get up, go walk around, which I do get up every 25 minutes at least to walk around. But I might go back through what I just read, and I'm like, oh, well, that's not, and then something just isn't right with your writing. Right. When I get stuck.
I think that's generally the case.
Yeah. So I'm not saying things don't happen every day, but everything is put in place to when something does happen, I can pivot and everything else can run smoothly. But yeah, it's all the systems that I have in place, that I do. So for instance, I even have a planner. My planners are so important. So every Sunday I'll sit down at the beginning of the week. Now I used to do stickers and all that kind of stuff, but I don't do any of that now. But now I just sat down at Sunday. I don't work on Sundays, except for looking at the planner. And then I'll look at my planner and I'm like, okay, I've got this coming up, this coming up, this coming up. And like I want to make sure that I've got everything, in place. So I know that at such and such time, I'm going to be talking to Misa, right? So at this time that day, I'm not going to be writing to the Patreon. I'm not going to be doing whatever it is task I might need to do.
Blocked out, yeah.
So totally blocked out. And so just like, your chapter ones, I mean, it might take me 20 minutes to read a chapter 1, but I'm going to take that hour and I'm going to read a chapter 1 of another book too. So in a few weeks, that chapter 1 can come out. So time blocking in my planner is big. So just like the time blocking for my CEO day is big.
And then it's the commitment to that.
Yeah.
Like the regiment that you have of getting up and doing exercise and committing to the writing, and then CEO day, but you have to really be committed to, okay, this is in my planner. This is what I'm doing.
Right.
It's hard for some people too.
It is hard for people, but I also know that if I don't do it, then who's going to put food on the table?
Right.
Not that not that that is, but even before, like Eddie just started working for me just a few weeks ago. So even before that, I'm still thinking who's going to put food on the table, even though he's had his job for 35 years, I knew there was going to be food on the table, but I'm just saying that, I take my job serious, and, it's a job. And so sometimes, if people have the freedom not to have to do this as a job, then why are you doing it? I'm teasing. No, but I love it. I mean, I couldn't imagine not writing. Like, I'm passionate about, when I talk to readers about my books, I'm passionate about it. And I love the job part of it, the entrepreneurial part.
Well, and you've come to a point in your career where, it's taken time to develop all of this. Because I remember back in the day where you would be at Jack's basketball practice or something, and sitting at a tree writing. You're like, oh yeah, I wrote for an hour and a half or in the car while he was at practice, so you have to evolve as, your life changes and the kids grow up, and, you have more books now, and you develop those processes for whatever
we all
works
start with one book, and, even if the one book, you can take snippets, you can still read the chapter one, you can do all the things on social media, whatever social media you like. And people say, oh, I hate social media. I hate to tell you, you have to be somewhere on social media nowadays.
Oh yeah.
I mean, you just have to be you just got to make peace with that. But making peace with it is maybe scheduling it, so you don't have to be on there all the time. And I'm not on there all the time. But to make peace with that, you have to be. But you can schedule, really fun posts. For instance, it doesn't even have to be about your book, but what's the theme of your book? If you're a knitter, put up some knitting, funny something or other. Or, like for me, I have funny, camping things, or I put camping hacks and recipes in my books. I might send them to a site that might have, a camping hack, because a lot of people are following me that love camping.
Right.
So then I have the Killer Coffee series. It's not all about camping. I'm just talking about that just because that happens to be what I'm writing in right now. I'm thinking about it. But like, the Killer Coffee series, people love to, coffee mostly, or tea or whatever. So I might put up like, something, benefits of coffee, besides my coffee post every day, so it's something different. So now also something I've incorporated that has just kind of taken off is every morning I take a video, a 30-second video of my coffee. And I'm like, good morning. And then I pan around to see the view. Then I'm panning back to my coffee and say, have a good day. And that goes up. And people are like crazy. And if I don't do it a day, they're like, where's the coffee video?
Yeah.
And maybe that's not selling books, but it's enough to get people's attention to be like, oh, who is this person? Or what are they doing? And,
well, but it is because it's growing your community. That's why you have 17,000 people, on your Facebook page, and who knows how many thousands in your newsletter list, because that's what you're doing is building community.
And people say, oh my gosh, I like you as a person. I'm going to try your book.
Right.
Exactly. And I'm honest with them. I'm like, our books have mistakes probably. I do have a professional editing service, that edit it 3 times, as well as a couple hundred ARC readers. But, I'm not going to be that book that you pick up and like, oh, that changed my life. I'm going to help you escape. I'm going to let you laugh, even though it's a murder. I always say it's a smidgen of homicide with, I'll say I'm Southern hospitality with a smidgen of homicide. Smidgen, maybe 1 or 2 bodies. Anything other than that, I consider a thriller, and I do not write thrillers. So, you're just going to get, that kind of thing. It's not going to be perfect. I'm not perfect. My books aren't perfect. So, don't email me and tell me that they're a mistake, because I'm not going to read the email.
Yeah.
I love you, but, so, I don't take myself too serious. So like I said, when I can sit down and put these systems into place, that, oh my God, I know something's going to happen. I know that at 2:00 in the afternoon, I'm going to drink a cup of coffee. I'm going to sit down and watch Days of Our Lives. I know that that's going to happen. I'm not perfect. And although I'm like, oh, I'm going to write, during Days of Our Lives, and I'll watch it tonight. I like to watch it live. So I'm just saying that, I know that life happens, and, I have built the systems to where when life happens, I'm like, okay, life happens. I'm not going to get upset about it.
The whole thing doesn't fall apart because
it doesn't fall to the ground. Right. Yeah. And so that's mainly what I felt like, writers need to have systems in place. So, to have the freedom of not having to be on social media. I mean, when you've got a monthly, file that you can pull from every year, no matter what social media comes, the content's there. You might just have to tweak it a little bit to be on that content, be on that platform. I think that that's made it so much easier for me and relieves me, and not gives me anxiety to be on the social media.
Yeah. Or feel like you're always a step behind, always playing catch up.
Always. Yeah. Sorry about that. I was getting a phone call and I clicked it. I don't know if it interrupted that, but anyways. And so, it's just, you have to be flexible, but you have to be committed, when you work from home, because, it is a job.
Yeah, just like if you were reporting to a boss, it's you're the boss, though. You're the CEO.
Right.
You've got to report to or be accountable to.
Right. And I make it with my assistants that it's so easy to get the information that, I do touch base with them once a week because I feel like that's important, but I trust them so much that if I didn't talk to them every week, I'm like, they've got this, they've got it. They've got everything at their fingertips. So they're not missing something. To where if I was to be like, I can't be on social media, then they can be they're not admin on my author page because I do all of that. Because I think it's important. I don't think that my assistant Karen could go on there and be like, hey y'all, she's Canadian. I don't think she could write a post as me. Right.
Yeah.
So
and your readers want to know that they are engaging with you too.
Right. So, yeah. So, and then people are like, okay, well, when do you get on social media to, comment back or whatever? I do get on at night. Eddie likes to watch MASH. So when he's watching MASH, I'll get on and I only go to my stuff and comment for, the half hour or whatever it is. And then I'm off. I don't get lost in other people's things and other people's stuff. And as a matter of fact, I didn't even have a personal page where people could be friends with me, except for my family for years. And my mom, my Facebook page, my Facebook author page, because the author page is separate from the other Facebook. It's a separate thing. My Instagram, everything I have on social media is my mom's password because my mom gets on my social media because she won't have her own. I'm like, Mom, let's get your own. So when she was in the hospital for those many weeks, I wasn't on that page and I didn't have any friends on that page. So I would see her just sitting there in the hospital with her iPad, just kind of home humming, just kind of picking. And I said, oh my God, I need to get back on the personal page with all my relatives. So she has something to do. So just in the past, few months, I've invited my cousins and everything back on the personal page. But I'm like, do not get on, that other side of the page. So I really just stay on the author page.
Yeah. Same.
So, yeah. So, and that's where, unfortunately, I have to be because that's where my readers that are on social media are at.
Yeah.
Even though I've seen that swing, what I've noticed is that the swing that I've seen are from the younger girls that are book bloggers, podcasters, those kind of rabid readers. So it's interesting.
Thank you again, Tonya, for being here. So much great information. And we will have you back again, definitely, to have a different craft chat. Thank you, everyone, for being here. And we'll see you later.
Thanks for having me.